There's this one specific region out in the Atlantic Ocean that has just completely captured the world's collective imagination. Like nowhere else even comes close. We're talking about a place where massive, heavily crewed ships have reportedly vanished without a single trace, where airplanes literally just drop off radar screens never to be seen again. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving deep into a place surrounded by wild stories of strange events, unexplained disappearances, and, mysterious forces. We're looking at the reality of the Bermuda Triangle. Right off the bat, we really have to ask ourselves the ultimate question here. Is this legendary area truly some sort of dangerous zone where the fundamental laws of nature just fail? Or is the reality of this mystery much simpler and, honestly, a lot more human than most people believe? When we hear these incredible, spooky stories of vanishing crews and lost squadrons, it is incredibly easy to let our imaginations just run entirely wild. But as focused learners, our goal today is to strip away all that Hollywood sensationalism and look really closely at what the actual evidence is telling us.
Okay, let's dive into this and map out the actual physical space we're talking about here. The Bermuda Triangle is basically an unofficially named region sitting in the western Atlantic Ocean. It gets its famous geometric name from the way it's usually described, connecting three major points: Miami, Florida, the island of Bermuda, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. But here's something absolutely crucial to understand right from the get-go. Unlike countries, states, or, official geographical locations, the Bermuda Triangle does not actually have any officially recognized borders. Like, you literally won't find it formally drawn out on any official maritime map.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer scale of what we're dealing with here, just think about this number: 500,000. That area we just mapped out, it covers roughly 500,000 square miles of open, deep ocean. That is an absolutely massive amount of water. We're talking mind-bogglingly huge. So how on earth did such a vast, borderless patch of the Atlantic become synonymous with the supernatural? Well, the name itself actually only got popular in the 20th century. It happened mostly after writers and journalists, specifically guys like Vincent Gaddis, who actually coined the term back in 1964, started publishing these wildly popular magazine articles about mysterious disappearances out there. They slapped a catchy name on it, grouped together decades of completely unrelated maritime tragedies, and boom, a global legend was born.
To really understand the absolute grip this legend has on the public, we need to look at the stories that started the whole shebang. And one of the most famous incidents, one that is just inextricably tied to the Bermuda Triangle, went down in 1945. It involved a group of 5 United States Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. You probably know them as Flight 19. Honestly, this is the story that truly cemented the Bermuda Triangle in pop culture as this place of eerie, unexplainable doom. Let's just walk through the eerie timeline of what actually happened that day, because it's wild. On December 5th, 1945, these 5 military bombers took off from Florida for what was supposed to be just a totally routine training mission. The weather at the start? Completely normal. But partway through the flight, the squadron leader reported that their navigation equipment was malfunctioning. The pilots became dangerously confused about exactly where they were over the open water. Radio communication got increasingly choppy and eventually just broke down completely. And then, all 5 aircraft disappeared. Just gone. And to make matters even more chilling, a rescue plane that was immediately sent out to search for them, well, it vanished too. It's this haunting sequence of events that immediately sparked crazy theories about alien abductions and supernatural portals. Now, what's really interesting about this comparison is that when we take that terrifying legend and hold it up against the hard facts of the actual military investigation, a completely different story emerges. The legend tells us that Flight 19 was, swallowed by unknown forces or beamed up by extraterrestrials wanting a closer look at some vintage bombers. But the reality? The investigations pointed to a chain of very fatal but very earthly events. We're actually looking at severe navigational errors by a deeply disoriented crew, rapidly changing weather conditions that turned a totally routine flight into a nightmare, and ultimately, fuel shortages. Once they were lost and out of gas out there over the open ocean, the fate of those planes was sealed by physics, definitely not the supernatural. But Flight 19 wasn't the only major piece of this puzzle. We actually have to go back a little further to another huge pillar of the Bermuda Triangle mythos, and that's the disappearance of the USS Cyclops back in 1918. This was a massive U.S. Navy cargo ship carrying more than 300 people. It was just traveling through the Atlantic when it vanished. And when I say vanished, I literally mean vanished. No wreckage was ever found. Not a single piece of debris. Nothing. At the time, with over 300 lives lost in complete silence,
A lot of people immediately jumped to the conclusion that this was undeniable evidence of something profoundly mysterious happening in that specific stretch of ocean.
So, the crucial point is, just like with Flight 19, when we contrast the spooky ghost story of the USS Cyclops with historical reality, earthly explanations take over again. Listen, we all love a good mystery for sure, but historians and naval experts believe several highly realistic scenarios are at play here. We're talking about the very real potential for sudden, severe weather, which, by the way, is incredibly common in that area. We're looking at catastrophic mechanical failure out on the open seas. Or, honestly, perhaps the most likely culprit, severe structural problems caused by the ship's unbelievably heavy cargo of manganese or shifting during transit. Any single one of these earthly realities could easily send a massive ship straight to the bottom of the ocean without leaving a single trace on the surface.
Which brings us to a really pivotal moment in our explainer. We've looked at the legends, and we've seen the realistic explanations for these specific events. But we really need to address the core assumption that holds this entire myth together in the first place. Are ships and planes actually disappearing more often in the Bermuda Triangle than anywhere else? I mean, it's the absolute foundation of the whole legend, right? The idea that this specific 500,000 square mile patch is statistically deadlier than the rest of the world's oceans. Well, let's see what the data actually says.
And this brilliantly illustrates an absolute truth about the region. As maritime experts point out, there is simply no strong evidence that the Bermuda Triangle has more disappearances than other heavily traveled areas of the ocean. Period. The answer might actually surprise you, but it's a real game changer for understanding this whole topic. The Atlantic Ocean, and specifically this region connecting Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda, is one of the busiest maritime and aviation hubs in the entire world. Thousands upon thousands of ships and airplanes pass through this exact area every single year. It's just simple probability, guys. More traffic naturally means more accidents are likely to occur. It's not a higher rate of disappearance. It's literally just a higher volume of travel.
Let's move on and see how this builds. Because if the numbers don't actually add up to some supernatural anomaly, why do people still believe it's so mysterious? Well, it's mostly because this specific region has some very intense, very real natural characteristics. The scientific explanations are firmly rooted in nature, not magic. This region is notoriously famous for sudden, incredibly violent tropical storms and massive hurricanes that can easily overwhelm even modern state-of-the-art vessels. So, you combine those highly aggressive weather patterns with the extremely high volume of traffic we literally just talked about, and unfortunately, you have a perfect recipe for tragic but entirely natural accidents. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up our explainer today. Is human imagination actually more powerful than the stormy reality of nature? Think about it. The Bermuda Triangle teaches us a lot about the ocean, sure, but it might actually teach us even more about ourselves. When we're faced with the vast, intimidating, and sometimes really tragic realities of a chaotic natural world, our minds often just prefer a spooky, neatly structured legend. It's somehow easier to blame a mysterious invisible force than to accept the harsh truth that a sudden storm and a simple navigational error can literally erase massive ships and planes from existence. Thank you so much for joining me to uncover the facts behind the myth today. I hope this leaves you questioning the next great legend you hear. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.